Welcome to the Integrate This Tech podcast. I'm Jeremy Mikla, joined by co-host David Berner, and we're joined with us today, Jeremiah Frink. Jeremiah is a former classroom teacher from Rochester. He also is now currently with Dell. And Jeremiah, welcome to the program, and we're glad to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Love to listen to y'all. I'm looking forward to having a chance to chat.
Yeah, why don't you kick off for us, just giving us a little bit of background of your story? How did you go from being a classroom teacher to where you are today?
Started as an elementary teacher. Never thought I'd end up where I am, but life takes us interesting paths. Spent about 20 years in public education, teacher, coach, administrator, director in many different organizations. I worked in Rochester City School District. I worked in some rural areas. So I guess I just always liked a lot of variety. Had a chance to start up and run an online program, a virtual school, while I was doing some of that work. And then an opportunity came to maybe work beyond education and support it from outside, and thought it sounded like an interesting way to go, and have had a chance to work with Dell, work with ISTE ASCD, work with Intel some, doing some different work. And now I am with Dell. And the process there was really just looking at the fact that I had a lot of time, 20 years in education. How could I further impact and move the field forward? And it seemed like this could be an opportunity, and have had fun doing it.
Yeah, and I know as part of that time when you were in the classroom, you're also recognized for your work around innovation. What were you doing in the classroom that you think caused, that really caught people's attention?
Well, I this is going to sound strange, but I feel like one of the things is that I was always looking at the kids and their future, and that's become a thing for me all along. But what that meant, though, is that I was always trying to figure out how I was helping them look to their next step. And so we did some things such as way early on, and this is going to date me, but I guess the gray beard shows that for those who can see on video or see my picture, is that in 2000, so way early on, we were connecting with people around the world in my classroom to ask them questions, to do some projects, and that sort of thing. So I was already trying to push how can we leverage technology in a way that helps us do learning differently, and always looking for that authentic meaning for the students. And I think that just connected, and that went into them standing up the virtual program that I ran, because it was, we can do this differently. We can think about this differently. We can be more personalized and support the students. And then that went into when I was a director, and we looked at new and innovative ways to try and really, yes, use technology, but more stay true to what we know good learning looks like, and just find new and innovative ways to do it. So I think that's where I kind of connected in.
Yeah, so that drive seems to kind of come from wanting to find a better place for students to be and improve their learning here. Was there any single moment that kind of sparked that for you, or is it just kind of was a gradual buildup through your years in education?
Um, yeah, I guess a specific moment in time was, I'd had the opportunity to work with lots of other people. When I was teaching in Rochester City, though, I had students who hadn't had the opportunity to even be outside of the part where we were, the inner city neighborhoods that they had lived in their entire life. And this was upper elementary school, age of about middle school. And as we began to expose and connect them, two things happened. One was to see their eyes just open to the world has potential that I never thought of. And that hits any, I think, educator's heart. But then the other piece was that they began to connect with these other people who valued what they were saying in their experience. And they said, not only can I connect, but what I have has value to the broader world. I can actually do something that impacts the globe. And those two pieces it was a project that we were working on. It was a global project. We were connected with 5 different places around the world, and we were all working to better understand each other. But the idea was, what can we do and learn from each other, but do something together for good? And so that's what came out of it. And that just hit me.
So Jeremiah, we see a lot too, and Jeremy and I have talked to a lot of folks that they've been in the classroom, and then they'll work with various organizations on
Yeah.
different initiatives that revolve around ed tech. And what has that experience been like for you, like knowing what it's like to be in a district, and maybe
Mm.
why do you think that that's like a really important perspective to have as you make a transition to working for a company like Dell?
That's I actually struggled with my transition because mine wasn't looking for something. It was this opportunity came up and I said, that sounds too good to be true. And so then did finally move over and it's been proving out, right? The opportunities to really help move forward. But to your point, I think a lot of times within industry, those who are in industry, whatever they're doing, you spent time in the classroom as a student, you never really understood what it means to really help support an organization around teaching and learning. And so as someone who's come from having to do that at multiple levels, I've had almost every position within a school district. And so from multiple levels coming over and being able to help Dell or other organizations better understand what schools really need, that we need to be thinking differently about the not only the support and the solutions on the product side, but even more, how do we show up in schools differently than we might show up at a company? And that's really important to have that mindset in education when you're working at a company, and bringing that over helps them. I think from the other side, I everything I do is viewed from that lens of how do we help our students? And I think that's the core of what education is. And so from the educator's side, the leader's side, as I'm working with them, they're saying, all right, this guy has sat in my desk at one point and kind of gets what we're doing. And so the conversations of what we can do and how we can support really shifts very quickly from, okay, what's the latest technology that you have to provide to us, to how do we really hit the core mission together? And that's been the exciting part of this position that I've had.
Yeah, and I want to dig into some specific things too, or Jeremy will as well with you. But as you've been with Dell, what are some of the big like categories that you've spent time being involved in and
Yeah.
researching and things like that? Like from the higher view, like what are the categories that you've been involved with?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you kind of throughout time, obviously thinking about technology and its role. So, how does that shift what we can do with teaching and learning? And that's from the planning side with the teachers to, yes, the students, to the leaders, the administrators. How do we open up the way we structure things in a school and support our teachers so that they can be more helpful? And I know that's a broad piece, technology, but if you think about it, it's shifted the way that we access information, it shifts the way that we can create, and all of those core aspects of just the way we do school. We need to have the conversations and think differently, and then think about, so what does that mean for our teachers with professional learning and that sort of aspect? So I think that's one large category. Another is looking at the space. So thinking about the classroom space, not first of all, as you've heard some of the virtual things that I've done, not saying you're stuck in the classroom. How do you use technology to connect outside and to bring the outside in appropriately and connect out so the students have authentic voice outside of just their classroom space, but also even the physically space within the classroom? If we have certain ways of thinking and doing, and we're trying to encourage certain global competencies, certain skills for our students to develop, how do you set up your room so that it supports that? And that's a really interesting conversation to have. And then, of course, right now, everyone is talking about AI. And so that's a big one that we've been looking at as well, obviously. And then I'd say the one last category is that whole piece of students and how we help them become um, members of a global community, and really thinking about, yes, the skills, but also the dispositions, and how do we create opportunities for that? Sometimes that's within a curriculum with a unit, sometimes that's a whole course, sometimes that's an after school project, sometimes that's a challenge. So there's different ways that we make sure students have the opportunity to engage with different careers, yes, but also where they're constantly building up those skills they're going to need for their future. And I think that's been a core piece too that we've really looked at and thought about. Obviously, that lines up well with a company point of view, because as they look at the students coming into the company, they want to make sure these students have the types of skills they need. But from an education point of view, looking forward, that's also saying, all right, we want to prepare our students for their future, not just the workplace, but the life they're going to lead. How do we do that well? So I think that's another core area that I've had a chance to really focus on.
Yeah, and as you have worked with different districts, like different contexts, so thinking about like rural, suburban, urban districts, one of the things that obviously we all have in common is we're being impacted by technology in some way, and especially now with AI, right, as you mentioned. But as you've worked with schools in those different contexts, have you noticed anything that is like commonalities between them, or and differences as well, like in how maybe they approach talking about technology or integrating
Yeah.
technology? Is there anything that has stood out to you?
I think you're right. There's an aspect that all of us are grappling with. Technology is shaping our society and therefore the future we're going to live in. It does look different per context, though, at times. What's ironic is I mentioned some of the students I was working with, and I grew up in Rochester City. And so I kind of can somewhat relate to this for part of my life anyway, which is you kind of get that neighborhood piece where you're sort of within, yes, this broader city, but you only interact with that small neighborhood. That's very similar to what often happens with rural students, too. So there's actually some interesting connections across that. In terms of the technology, I think it's a lot of times helping to see where it's already embedded throughout society. I don't think students or teachers sometimes realize the extent to which it's embedded. So that as you think about, well, I'm going to work on the farm, as I worked with some of the rural communities, we'd say, great, let's go look at the farm. Let's go see what they're doing there. And all of a sudden you just realize, all right, there are some farms that are using drones to oversee the pasture land. They're using data chips in the ears for the cows when they come into milk to be able to track what they're doing. So yeah, okay, you want to be with your hands on the farm. That's true. Technology still impacts because it's a useful enabler for us to reach greater levels as humanity. But that does mean you have to figure that out. So I think that's some of the pieces that I see, sort of the connective piece, yet it is different per context what that actually looks like.
One of the areas that you've done some really good work in is around the idea of data literacy. And so I'm going to kind of
Okay.
switch towards that as a topic. But I mean, I think it applies to your farming example that you were just talking about here, too. The importance of being able to take the data that you have and use that data to implement better processes or to find, more innovative ways to make connections, and maybe improve people's lives, or at least to, in a classroom setting, maybe to help improve the learning that's taking place for those students. Like, why is it though that, like, and I know, like, when I hear data, I'm like, oh, step back. I can't, that goes way beyond me, and I don't want to try to dig too deep into that. But I see the importance of it and the relevance of it. And why is it though that you think it's schools still struggle to help implement, really strong data literacy programs?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. All right, I'm going to share a little bit of a secret about my life. When I started out as a teacher, I never wanted to be an administrator. Ew. I never wanted to work for a vendor. Ew. And are you kidding me? Data, numbers, like spreadsheets. I knew how to use them, but come on, that's boring. Right? So it's kind of funny that now you're having me kind of look at this piece. But it really was sort of that aspect that as you look to the future, if we're really focused on our students, well, forget about the future. Look at the current world. Data is almost the lifeblood of technology. It's what helps things flow. It's what informs. We talk about AI. It's what informs AI. It's what AI is trained on. When you look at within just the future that students have, we have a whole aspect where, yes, you can look at when you look at the reports, a lot of times what you see around data is, here are the jobs for data, and that these are going to grow. That's good. But what you don't see a lot of times in those reports is, this is how every job is going to be using data or AI in the use of data. And so, back to your question, I know I kind of went a little afield, but I'm coming back. The whole answer to your question around why it is, two things. One, in education, unfortunately, we tend to lag behind where things are. And so our curriculum, what we see needs to be in place, a lot of times does lag behind a little bit. And so in our standards, data is a piece, but it's a one-off, it's a unit. Instead of realizing that throughout, in social studies, in science, we should be looking at data. We should be creating visualizations to be able to share, how do you tell a data story? That should be a part of our ELA classrooms. That I don't think many places are ready to see. But if you look at the curriculum, though, what the issue is, as I said, it's segmented. Now, how to get it going forward, the piece that I said, ew, data, I think is how many people see it. And so that's, you mentioned some of the work we've been doing. We've really been trying to help have different programs, different projects where both educators as well as students can start to see the power of data, the way that data impacts their own life, the way that they can utilize data to help improve their own life and their learning processes. So that's some of the work that we're working on to try and do. But I think there's where the roadblock has come with school
Mhm.
districts, is just, it's not yet seen as critical to our education because we're still figuring out what that looks like. And rightly so. We should never just say, here's the future, throw it into school. We need to take the time to process it. But it's time.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I think teachers have always done well is to find ways to make their content relevant to their students. Whether and one of the ways is through real world examples. And so, really, if we're focusing on data literacy as part of that, I think connecting it to material or content or examples that students can relate to is also really important. So, can you tell us a little bit about data dunkers?
Yeah, so it is taking all of what we just were saying around the importance of data, but as you said, connecting it to the students. And so Data Dunkers is a program that we've been running for about 3-4 years at Dell now. And what it really looks at is, yes, combining data literacy and, as AI has become more prevalent, AI literacy with dunkers, basketball. And so we work with Pascal Siakam's foundation, PS43, and we use data from the WNBA and NBA to really look at those pieces. And what students are doing is they're asking questions of the data, and we help them do that. They are also using some coding and data tools that professionals use right within there, and we help them hack the code, as we say. But the idea is to take apart how technology interprets the data and what you have to watch out for when technology is doing that, whether it's AI or just a program script that someone has written. And we help them create data visualization so they can then tell a story. But also what we do is we, to your point, connect it back to real world. So they're actually collecting their own data around basketball about different attributes that they have. And then they do that same thing. They analyze it using these same tools, and then they tell their own story or the story of their team or their group. And so we have a lot of fun with it. But that idea of, where does it connect? How do you see that when you went in, you collected this data, and then you went back and collected more data? How does that look different now? And then we do spend some time looking at, and so what does this mean for your future? And we have some fun times with students kind of digging into different careers that they might be interested in. And then as they look at those, finding out this is how data impacts that career, and the surprise that's on their face around that. I never realized that, oh, well, I'm going to be a chef. Okay, let's talk about how much data actually impacts what you would do as a chef. Really? So those sort of things are just fun to do within it. But that's the program at its core.
I really love hearing how you, because literacy just seems to, in my mind, have been a buzzword for the last couple of years, and everything has a literacy attached to it: AI literacy, data literacy, reading
Digital
literacy. I mean,
literacy.
math literacy. I mean, it's all right there. And to hear you describe it, you're putting into this the Data Dunkers program, like it wraps and encompasses all of these different types of literacies in it.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I agree with you. You forgot digital literacy.
And digital literacy, media literacy. I
Oh,
mean,
there you go.
yeah.
Information literacy. Yeah, we could keep going. But I think so often, to your point, a lot of times literacy becomes within those different areas a specific thing. The use of technology is what digital literacy means. Well, hang on. No, that's not what it is. And so I think with a program like this, what we're trying to do is really get into this is how you actually become literate with data so that you are aware of it, you're able to use it, and you're actually able to tell a story with it, because data is more than just numbers, as we always say in our program. It is about how can data be useful. If it's not, then it's just numbers. Otherwise, this is how it can impact lives. And we tell great stories. Mind if I do a quick one?
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right. So one of the things we do is, I mean, this gets into those who are more basketball geeky, but we tell about how early on, as they began to analyze data, they began to see the aspect of where you shoot on the court between the 3-point line, where you get 3 points versus 2 points within the 3-point line. If you're a step within the 3-point line versus at the 3-point line, the percentage of likelihood that you're going to make the shot is pretty much the same. And so you can see, as from like early 2000s to now, where people are tending to take their shots has changed dramatically. It used to be spread across that court. Now it's either under the hoop or at the 3-point line. And that was because they started to analyze the data. And that kind of powerful story, especially for the kids that like basketball, is meaningful. It shows that it changed a whole sport.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because I oftentimes will tell my wife something very similar when it comes to buying Powerball tickets for the lottery. Is whether I buy one or 100, my statistical odds of winning are about the same, but I have to buy one.
If you don't play, you can't win. All right, was that just an ad? We shouldn't have done that one. Anyway.
Yeah.
I was gonna say too. I'm not too big on data, but when fantasy football season comes around, then I get into data quite a bit. So
Yeah.
Um, so Jeremiah, I want to talk about another thing here. We're a little bit removed from ISTE now, a little over a month, and we had a chance to meet briefly at ISTE. But you had something going on there for the last couple years now with the ISTE plus ASCD Innovator Challenge. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about what the Innovator Challenge is and what that provides for students?
Yeah, you bet. So, yeah, I had a chance to, even before working now with Dell, work with this DACD, as you were just saying, and helping to stand up and run this program. And we have similar ones at Dell now that we're looking to stand up as well, and that we've done in the past. And the core piece of that is really saying, look, AI is out there. We do want students to become, sorry, I'm going to say it, AI literate. We do want them to be able to, though, beyond that, how can we look at its use for good? So how do we use it ethically and appropriately for something good? And that was the core idea behind the challenge. And then what we began to do is put out this global challenge. Okay, so as a team, can you identify a problem that's either in your community, and whether that community is local or global, and then come up with something using AI that would help to address that issue? And that at the core is what we were doing. And we have seen some amazing things from around the world. Things such as how do you help others understand sign language, either to learn it, that was one piece, or another, these students created a glove that would automatically recognize as the sign was happening and then would read out, so that it became, yeah, I know, right? The amazing things these students are doing, and read out what was being signed. We had other ones that were looking at helping build financial literacy. There you go. There's another one. And then we just had these amazing pieces. And what we found with that is that not only for the students, these were great opportunities for them, but then as we showcase this work, it became no longer this, okay, how are the students going to use AI to cheat, right? That's so often the conversation in education became the, how can we help our students be able to do that or do things like that in their future? And so that's really the work that we're looking to do is how do we help build these skills? Yes, but in a way that is meaningful to students and has them focused on how do we better our community with the skills that we're developing?
Yeah, and you've been kind of around. I mean, you went to the UK as well, right? And with
Yeah.
that UK in early 2026, and then you're at ISTE in the middle of the year here. Probably something else big coming up, I'm sure. But as you've been going through that process and being involved with um, the innovator challenge and kind of getting the word out on some of those things, what to you, how would you describe classroom ready AI? Like what actually works for a teacher when they're engaging with AI or trying to, going back to you mentioned AI literacy, trying to help students understand how to use AI. Is it just the exposure through the innovator program and things like that, or are there other ways that you think are really important too?
No, good call out. So we also recognize that the exposure is good, even with the challenge. But again, some of the programs that we're doing at Dell that looks at how do we surround the experience with the support where it's a purposeful building of skills and understanding. So a lot of times districts, teachers look at the efficiency side. For teachers, they look for students, the ways in which students can use some of these, get some coaching, get some feedback, that sort of thing. All good. Like, I don't want to say that those aren't. But if we're really looking to humans being the ones that continue to be creative, curious, push the forward thinking, then we need to have them creating. And I think that's a piece that a lot of times is missed. And that's what the challenge is meant to be. How do we have them develop these skills of innovators? How do we change the world and how do we create? And so, what we created this past time around was actually a studio. So, it was 15 lessons that really helped take teachers through a process that built in things like just the whole, how do I create, how do I develop prototypes? So that whole design thinking process was built right in. But also, how do we think about design thinking, not just from that sort of Western world way? How do other people around the world think about looking at and get that exposure to different ways of doing designing and thinking? And so that's what we built in so that they began to have a scaffolded approach to then moving it forward, so that students are actually creating with the AI and not just responding to something that's already been put out there and created, which is a lot of times the way that we do technology as a whole, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think so. From your perspective, then you would say that innovation is definitely a learnable skill, that students just need the chance, the opportunity to have a real world problem to apply it to, but then also the practice with it.
Yeah, and as teachers, scaffolding it up. So
Mhm.
absolutely, and multiple opportunities too. And I think that's one of the things we're seeing a shift with AI is a real shift to a more authentic. We call it project based at times, problem based. You can call it whatever you want, but it's looking at students really addressing the world around them and becoming a part of it and applying their learning to it. We talk about AI literacy, and so much of it is teach the prompt. The prompt is just the way we communicate with AI. Really, what we're needing to do is say, how do you define a problem for the AI to then address? And then how do you refine the solutions that an AI might come up with? How do we think through that process? And that is, to your point, something that we can teach on in a classroom and have done, to help them begin to develop those skills. We're very worried that AI is going to take away critical thinking. And that's one of the things I hear a lot. I'll tell you the truth, before AI really became as prevalent, that was still one of the concerns we had, with the students just weren't critical thinkers anymore. And so I think we need to provide opportunities in the classrooms that pushes them a bit to think critically. And if we don't have those opportunities there, then no wonder they're having a hard time being able to apply that skill. They haven't had a chance to build up that muscle.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere or heard you say, I can't remember which it was, that um, one of the things that you love doing at Dell is having brainstorm sessions where you can just let your imagination run wild. Is that something that we can provide for kids? But then, then that's just the starting point, I think, of that design process that you're talking about. Well, maybe recognizing a problem first, then the ideation around it, right? I'm thinking very design thinking literacy skills here, right? But uh, you know, that's really what you're talking about here, right? Is providing those opportunities for students to have some of those same sessions like you're talking about, just bring it to the classroom, repeat those at different activities, just applied to different courses or content or problems.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, to your point of using brainstorming as a good example, I think we talk about this with collaboration too. A lot of times when we think of how do we be creative, we say, well, you brainstorm. What does that mean? Come up with all the ideas you can and put it on board. Collaboration. Well, what does that mean? Well, you just do something in groups. And in both of those examples I just gave, it's more than that. If you're trying to be creative, it's more than just brainstorming. And so understanding that and providing students with an opportunity, and to your point, not just saying what's crazy, but pushing their thinking. Take two really crazy ideas. I've done with this with leaders even, and mash those together, see what works and doesn't work. And out of that process, you're going to be able to better understand the problem. You'll define it better, but also the potential solutions we have. We'll do one activity that is just what's the worst possible solution to this problem? Wait, why the worst possible? Because in defining the worst, you start to define why is it the worst, and you're defining what is actually going to make a good solution. But it's fun to do the worst possible because you get crazy with it, but it also pushes your thinking outside of our sort of, okay, here it is, now let's figure it out, move on kind of scenarios that we tend to do.
So I want to address just a little bit more about you and your background, and you have, I believe you have 5 kids, right?
Yes.
So, and I think one of your bios said you're listed as a father first there. So, obviously that's role number one. What's it been like, interacting with your kids, and as you've kind of gone around and you've worked with all these different technologies, and they've got their own school experiences and things like that, and especially with AI. What have some of those conversations been like, or has it provided you
Yeah.
any different insights on things?
Yeah, and especially the span of kids. At one point, I had the oldest was leaving K-12 and the youngest was just entering. So you kind of get this spectrum of just seeing the changes happen. And obviously, around the dinner table, wherever we have the conversations, I think what's been most interesting is at times I've actually recorded them with their permission, of course, because they'll say things about school and I'll say, can I record that? Because we need to hear from a student's perspective in this presentation I'm about to do. And so it's really good to have that kind of piece that grounds me throughout, to really see this is impacting real kids, and also is the reason I do the work I do. I think to your point of AI, it's been interesting too. Many people say, well, yeah, technology as a whole and even AI, kids just do it because they know it. What's been interesting is to see, I have two of my boys who don't want to use AI, for fun little things, yes. But the one, he's into art and he's like, I get what AI can do and how it can change, especially like the movie industry. He's very much into that. He said, but at the same time, this is taking away creativity from people, and this is taking away what they can do. And he's kind of, I don't know if I like AI. My other wants to become a programmer and he's saying it's going to steal my job. I don't want to any. He'll criticize it. Did you do that with AI? Because AI is going to take away my job. He's 14, by the way. um, so these are the kind of conversations that I think sometimes are important for us to have, because we kind of put students all together. So I think that's for me where it's been grounding, is to see the piece where, you know uh, our students are kids, yes, and they are looking to their future too. And sometimes they almost better understand the impact of this technology on the society in which we live than sometimes we recognize and give them credit, or we ourselves are realizing.
Yeah, and that's really important points. And you've kind of described yourself too as a lifelong learner. And have you? I don't know how much you've. I'm kind of throwing this one in, but if you've looked at some of the screen time conversations that I've gone
Yeah.
on, um, what's your thoughts on the impact of that? Like, still trying to retain being a lifelong learner, knowing that there's potential disruptions to that, maybe for overuse of screen time or not for, using it as a kind of a more of a babysitter as opposed to like something
Yeah.
that really helps with learning. Do you have any thoughts there just on like trying to retain those two things, like knowing the importance of technology and keeping that at the front as well, because it is important for our students' future, but then at the same time, making sure it's not disrupting the lifelong
Yeah.
learning process?
It's a good call out, and especially working now for a technology industry. But I look back about a year ago, I was working with early childhood and how we bring STEM into that, and help them really understand that. And I think, to your point, one of the conversations we were having is, hang on, yes, technology can do a lot, but where is the appropriate use that's going to move forward what we're trying to actually do with the students? How do we ensure that technology is a connective and not a siloing type of interaction that the students are having? So we began to look at what is core to good learning and could core to students just being able to grow and develop as humans. And then you say, and what are the tools and resources to help me? And I think that's the core of what the screen time conversation should be. You look through sort of technology into education history, and so much what happens is it's a new technology, let's buy it, let's throw it in the classroom. Oh, it's not really working. Well, that's because of the technology, or that's because of this teachers, or that's because of, and we never took the time to say, where does it make sense? Yes, it provides us with a lot, but where does it make sense for what our mission and our core piece is? And so I think that's the piece that is missing. And so tying it back to the lifelong learning, I'm still going to use my technology to learn without a doubt. And I think we should think about that as well. For students, we need to help them also. What is it that you want to learn, and what are some of the best ways to do that? Is it to go to another human and have a conversation? Probably at some point in the process, you better do that. And so realizing that that same thing that we're grappling with as adults, it's not about banning or increasing screen time. It's helping the students, our children, better understand what is it you're trying to do and how can technology help? And where is it going to get in the way? Where will it do, like my son said, take away your job? No, but where will it make it so that you aren't doing the thinking anymore? And that's the way I shifted the conversation with him, where you're not doing the thinking anymore and you're just giving it to AI. Yeah, that's a problem. So I think that's the piece that we need to work is, how do we help our students and ourselves continue to be that lifelong learner, and the focus on the learner. And then how do we do that? Well, of course it's going to involve technology at some point, but it's not all about the technology.
No, definitely not. I mean, even if you're going to use technology to advance your own learning in an area that you're interested or passionate or curious about, it's really going to mean nothing unless you can share that with other people. And that is where, you have to still be able to connect with other people, to have those conversations where you can, beyond just show what you know, but actually engage in meaningful, thoughtful dialogue.
Yeah. Well, and that's why you have this podcast, is how do you take all that you've
Hey.
learned and help spread out and connect with others? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is some of the best professional learning that I've ever had, is just being able to bring on people like yourself, and the other guests that David and I have been fortunate to have on our podcast. So that's really great. So I'm going to kind of walk you into our lightning round then, if you are ready here, Jeremiah. And
Let's do it.
you know, you can elaborate as much as you need to on these first few questions. But I'm going to kick it off with the first one. And I know David had mentioned that you've been to BET in London and this last ISTE Live in Orlando. What was the best part of each one of those for you?
The people, and as you kind of look at people coming from all different walks, I mean, over in Bet, that's amazing to hear multiple languages, multiple cultures all happening, and yet we're all trying to figure out education. And so I think that's the biggest piece, is just to your point, the connection to one another and being able to think together about the future, what we're trying to do in education and how technology can help. Doing that together is great.
What's a technology that you were really excited about initially and it flopped?
That's a good one. I don't know if it, I don't know if it quite flopped, but I would say a lot of the what you would call the Web 2.0, so the way in which you could create and students could create right on the fly, so your wikis, your blogs, all of that, I think that was something I was extremely excited about. And then it kind of got taken over in a not so great direction. So it's not that it flopped, but it went askew. All right, I just remembered one other. I'm going to hit the other. The other one I was super excited about was like the VR, the 3D virtual. Again, I wouldn't say it flopped, but in education, we finally found maybe where its niche is. I don't even know if we still have yet. So that's one that I'm not sure we've quite figured out yet, but I was super excited. Still think it's cool, but yeah, not there yet.
What one word would you use to describe the moment in education you think our schools are in right now?
Not doing so good on being lightning on these. Sorry about that.
I think it's lightning and just more it's random.
Yeah. Tipping point. And I feel like we've been at those before, but I realize that's kind of a hyphenated word, but I'm going to use it. I just feel like when we say we've been there before, but the world really is quite changing. The pressures come to such a point, and we see the way in which students, teachers are shifting out of more of our formal or our sort of public education systems, even globally, and recognizing the need to say, we need to figure out the way learning looks now and into the future.
What's your favorite thing about living in Rochester?
That it has the value of a city, but not so much that I can't get from one side to the other in like 30 minutes.
So what's the population of Rochester? I'm just kind of trying to draw a comparison to Rochester, Minnesota, which is the Rochester that's closest to us, Mayo Clinic and all that. And I kind of think the same thing about that, is you can kind of go back and forth across that city pretty, relatively easily.
I think in the greater Rochester area, so not just the city core itself, we're at about 1 million, I think is what we're at. So it might be smaller than that. Someone's going to fact check me and say you're completely wrong. You don't know your own city that you live in. But I think that I've heard that at one point or another. But yeah, it's the culture that's there. Mm-hmm. All of those great pieces, the food.
Sure. You touched on this here a little bit, besides recording your kids at the dinner table, what's conversation like around for your family when you're sitting down to dine together?
I find that we are either having these really deep conversations that seem to and maybe they get it from me, I don't know, but they will all of a sudden come up with these things and they will go deep on any topic you want. We've got the one that's the expert on any animal you could ever believe. And used to be he'd make things up sometimes. Now you fact check him, he's always right. It's just amazing. Either that, or we've got the others that we're going to just start singing. We're into musicals and everything as a family, so that they want to talk about all of that sort of thing. Or honestly, I do have this one daughter that will just break into song and we'll just start singing and get the rest of us to try and sing too. So that's what our dinner table looks like. It's pretty lively, especially when all 7 of us are there.
Well, good. This next one here is going to stick with that musical theme here. So David and I are going to have a conference tomorrow. You're going to be our keynote speaker, and walking out on stage, what do you want that walk-up song to be? As you're getting in front of the people and you want to energize them, ready for a spectacular keynote.
All right.
And be careful here, because David's going to take the song and he's going to add it to our Integrate This playlist that we have of all of the choices of our guests.
That's okay. That's okay. I think this one is good, although you want to start it about mid-song, I would say. So I'll go with the musicals theme. So Come Alive from Greatest Showman. Right in the middle of that is where it says, we're going to go into the future with eyes wide open. And the whole song is really talking about taking who you are and being okay with living that out. And I think that right now in education, students, teachers, they need to be seen, they need to be supported right now. And so I think if we can do that and then face our future, eyes open, not trying to hide, not saying we're not ready to face that yet, but say, let's figure this out together. I think that would just be phenomenal to just have that kind of energy to start out the conversation so we can move forward with it.
Yeah, I love that choice. Just the message of it is kind of the impactful part of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this next little section here, we are going to limit you here to just one or the other. It's a this or that, okay?
Okay.
All right, and the first one here, you have to choose one of these two things that is going to cease to exist. Which are you going to give up? Sports or technology?
Sports.
Okay. Would you rather communicate via text or on a call?
Call. I'm old school.
Do you prefer the mountains or the beach?
Mountains.
If you're traveling in the car, are you listening to music or a podcast?
Oh, one. Podcast. I am on a podcast. I got to do that.
There you go. Would you rather take a road trip across the country or fly to get to where you need to go?
Oh, all day road trip. Love them.
Awesome. And an NBA game with the kids or a quiet weekend at home?
Quiet weekend at home.
Perfect. Well, Jeremiah, thank you so much here for joining us on the podcast here. But before we let you off the hook, we'd love to give you an opportunity here to plug anything that you have coming up, or give a shout out to any particular thing that you would like to highlight, or add your socials or anything like that.
Yeah, I just say, at Dell, we just expanded with this team that we have of educational strategists, my type of role. Connect with yours in your region. We all came from education. We're all trying to figure this out together with our schools, our districts. So I'd say that that's sort of the plug, because we do have programs like Data Dunkers, Girls Hoop Games, Dell Student Tech Crew, that we're really wanting to move forward, as well as just our support of what you're trying to do. So I'd say that. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Jeremiah Frink. You'll find me there. There's fortunately not a ton of Jeremiahs and very few Frinks, so you put those two together, you usually find me.
Well, perfect. And we'll make sure to link any of those things in the show descriptions here as we release them. But again, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me. This has been good.